Hi, I'm Teresa, and I don't know what I'm doing with my intro anymore, so let's just get into this video, shall we? I have read my first 5-star of the year, and it's only January, so let's give it up, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I am so excited, especially since I started off the year with a stinker of a book. I mean, I hated the first book that I technically read for 2024. It was so rough. But Avery came in and said, "I got you, girl. I got you. Let me fix you right up with this beautiful book, Study in Drowning." Let's get into it. So for this review, I am planning on splitting it up into 2 parts, a non-spoiler section and a spoilery section. I'm not gonna lie, my spoilery section is probably going to be longer and a little bit more stream of consciousness because I have so many feelings about this book. So let's start with my non-spoilery review. Drowning is by Ava Reed. It is about Effie Sayer. She is a college student who is struggling with her schoolwork, her trauma, and her perception of reality. She enters and wins this competition to redesign the estate of a famous author who is recently deceased, Mirrodin. I believe that is how you say it, Myrrdin. Mirrodin was a hero to this fictionalized world, and him and his stories have been a guiding light for Effie throughout her life so far. But High Wraith Manor, as it is called, is not what it seems. It is a decaying, hopeless case that houses Mirrodin's temperamental son and his absent widow, as well as a literary scholar from the same college as Effie, who is there to collect Mirrodin's unpublished letters, essays, correspondence, and collect them for the college's archive. At least, that is what Effie is told at first. But Preston reveals his true cause for being there. He is there to prove that Mirrodin is a fraud. So Effie and Preston piece together the legacy of this reclusive author as they have to deal with threats, both magical and mortal, that seek to see their ruin. Ava Reed dives into some difficult topics with A Study in Drowning, so I feel it is important to outline the trigger warnings if you plan on reading this story. So the trigger warnings for this book are as follows. There are mentions of sexual assault, and there is the exploration of the shame that comes in the aftermath. There are numerous unwanted advances that are sexual in nature. This deals with misogyny and sexism, as well as has mentions brief encounters with xenophobia, and there is a reference to war with another fictionalized country. So if any of those things are not for you at this time or any time, then I would pass on the book. A Study in Drowning is Ava Reed's 3rd published novel, and as someone who has read both her debut and sophomore works, I have to commend her on the improvement of her craft. With her debut, The Wolf and the Woodsman, I felt that the story was lacking a tad in direction, but it had really strong characters, and I was so intrigued by the world she built. I positively reviewed The Wolf and the Woodsman, but it was not a 5-star because of those issues that I had with the direction of the story. It kind of went one way, and then another, and then kind of had trouble tying back the other way that it went into the story. And in her second book, Juniper and Thorn, I was enchanted by her prose, and I was endlessly impressed by her ability to tackle and take on such sensitive and huge topics and themes. I did find some of the choices made by the characters a tad confusing. I just didn't find that they were believable at points, and that is what I found lacking in her sophomore novel, but still very, very strong, but not a 5-star for me. It was a very enjoyable gothic fairy tale that she crafted. With The Study in Drowning, though, I felt that she paired all of those things that she did very well in her previous novels and just took them to another level and just nailed the parts that were lacking in the other novels in this. It was so good. I rated it 5 stars, obviously, and in my review, I simply put that it was a tour de force in writing. Her use of literary devices in this novel just enhanced the story that she told, and it was just loved it. Like angel singing, beautiful. I am beyond impressed with this book, and it is likely to be my best book of 2024. What does that say about the rest of my reading year? Who knows? But I just blown out of the water. So that is all that I have for my non-spoiler review. If you have read it and you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts, or if you have not read it, don't intend to read it, or just cool with spoilers, stick around. Thank you for watching so far if you have, and if you are leaving at this junction, thank you. And let us get into my spoilery review of this book. And I have a lot to say. So I gave you guys a summary. We know the trigger warnings. We know my general thoughts. Getting into the nitty-gritty of it, I loved what Ava Reed did with foreshadowing. And I will get more into quotes and stuff that she used that I lost my mind over in just a second. But I do want to say that I picked up on where the story was going, where it was heading about like 30 to 40% into it. But that did not stop me from having a good ass time with it. I just could not wait to see where the ride was taking us, even though I knew the end. I knew what was going on, I knew what was going to happen, but it was just a pleasure. And now I want to go into my highlights where I will be discussing more in depth the Kindle highlights that I have, what they are connected to, and some of it is super silly, but some of it does go into the literary devices that Ava Reed used that just worked. First thing in my highlights that I took, in my notes that I took while reading this book was, and this really got me, where are my Pride and Prejudice 2005 girlies at? There's a hand flex moment in this. Okay, so Effie and Preston just shake on their partnership. They have come to an agreement that they are going to work together. And I quote, Preston's hand dropped to his side at once, fingers flexing. You know, I know what image that conjures. That conjures up Mr. Darcy just, feeling the ghost of Elizabeth's touch. I died when I read that. The next moment is for my Cruel Prince girlies. Not everybody gets it, but I feel like Ava Reed gets it. There is a moment where Effie finds Preston's notes in the study at Highwraith Manor. And in the margin, and we don't find this out until the end of the chapter, so they've talked, but it's not mentioned at all, that in the margins, she finds just her name written over and over again. Effie, 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 Effie. Is it unhinged? Yes. Is it a red flag in the real world? Absolutely. That's crazy behavior. Creepy, stalkerish. But in this, do I care about that? No. I loved it. It was great. Okay, moving on. More about Preston Hulary. I believe that's how you say his last name. I could be very, very wrong. Him in his casual declarations, and it's not casual declarations of love. It's not like love at first sight, right? It's just the instant respect for her as a person, enough to say shit like, but I'll fight for you, Effie. I promise. To say, I have faith in you, in both of us. Just 30% into the story. They're not even friends yet. And he is just like, I trust this woman with my life. And then if I had to gamble, I would bet on us, Effie. Bitch! Me too! Oh my god. Again, this is just with the relationship aspect of it. Pretty shallow stuff. But Avery tapped into something here. There is nothing hotter than the person you're attracted to wanting you to quote your favorite book to them. That level of interest that they have in your level of interest of something, and then just the added layer of them wanting to hear your voice. That's not true, said Effie. In Angharad, the fairy king takes her out to see the ocean, and she says it's beautiful and free, lovely and dangerous and vast beyond mortal comprehension. The sea makes dreamers of us all. Preston gave her an odd look. It was the first time she'd seen him look bemused, quizzical. Finish the quote. Effie racked her brain to remember the passage. I looked to the fairy king behind me and the ocean before, the two most beautiful things I had ever seen. They were both creatures of rage and salt and foam. Both could strip me to the bone. I wanted nothing more than to tempt their wrath, because if I was brave enough, I might earn their love instead. Beautiful writing. Absolutely destroying. That scene destroyed me. Beyond Preston and his absolute amazingness, Effie was deeply relatable. Her as a character was just relatable to me on another level. And characters don't have to be relatable for you to enjoy a book, for you to rate a book highly. But just so happens in this case, Effie is fatherless and has a distant mother and is always on the edge of crying. So I just found that very deeply relatable, and it just struck a chord with me, and I was like, I'm right there with you, girl. Thanks for that, Ava Reed. Now onto the writing itself. The writing itself is crazy. Some techniques that she used, the biggest being foreshadowing. Her use of foreshadowing and how well it's done is just great. Some of the quotes, and if you've read it, you're right there along with me. If you haven't read it, I think you'll see where it's going. About women not being able to write things. It is said, how they could only write frivolous, feminine things, nothing that would transcend time or place, nothing that would last. On to the next quote. Whoever Miss Mirrodin is, she's not relevant to my scholarly inquiries. Men like to keep mad women locked up, where everyone could comfortably forget they ever existed. She was not afraid of the ghost, but she was horribly, wretchedly afraid of whatever had killed the woman it had once been. Goosebumps. Full body shivers at that. Oh my god. Men slept soundly in their beds while their wives and daughters were spirited away. That was what the story said about finding some stuff out about Mirrodin. Effie says, while she's talking to Preston, the things he said about women. I don't see how you could write a book like Angharad if you really believed women were empty-headed and frivolous. And so, my friends, the biggest spoiler of the book. Who actually wrote Angharad? Angharad did. Mirrodin's wife wrote the book. And the way that Ava Reed makes these allusions to the fact that she did, but also simultaneously, you don't see her, you don't even learn her name until the end of the book. It was just, the anticipation in me for that moment that I knew was coming was just so sweet. I cannot. People are often familiar with the literary device of foils. Some could say that Effie and Preston are foils to each other, and foils are often used and are really great literary devices, but we don't talk enough about literary mirrors. And the fact that Effie and Angharad are mirrors to each other is just crazy. They are both women who had the actions of men define who they are. And when you pair that with the fact that Ava Reed uses the motif of mirrors to reveal the truth in the story, just mind-blowing. And you don't have any mirrors in the story. There is the mention so many times of the absence of mirrors, of broken mirrors. Mirrors reflect things, mirrors show things as they really are, and that is not in the story until the end. Just like Angharad really isn't in the story until the end. Absolutely drives me insane. So good. And speaking of motifs, the biggest motif in A Study in Drowning is water. The drowning is a weather phenomenon in the world that Ava Reed has built, but water drowning, decay from water being something that reflects like a mirror, but also distorts the way things are. Water everywhere, mentions of water, allusions to water throughout the book, and it's not something that is like tacky. It's beautifully, beautifully done. And I wrote this thing that I think becomes a little bit cyclical. I kind of start going in circles with it, but basically, High Wraith is this distorted truth that Mirrodin constructed, right? He stole Angharad's work to get the fame that he has, but it's distorted in the book through the ocean that just is, the ocean that is basically truth. So to escape this distortion, you can't just be. You can't just be as you are. The truth has to be revealed. Somebody has to do something for it to come to light. And just everything that says, it's just so much. And the quote that I have paired with this from the book is, "As the sea to the sailor, strive with me and live, neglect me and drown." Minor mention there is also the motif of dreams. That wasn't really a motif that caught me, that I really analyzed, but I did note that it was there. So I wanted to mention it here. If you have anything you would want to add to that, then add it in the comments below. We also have metaphor, another literary device that I did not really pay attention to in my notes, but I did note. how there is the metaphor of the house itself, how the house is a metaphor for the decay and all of that. There's the Fairy King, he is a metaphor. I did not dive so deeply into that I have anything insightful to add to it, but I did want to note it. And then we can talk about the topics that Ava Reed discusses through this story. There, of course, is the folly of idolizing heroes. It likely doesn't work out. They don't live up to the standards that you have set for them, and often they disappoint you. There is, of course, the theme of sexism, the topic of women's place in academia that this novel explores, and it does it so well. Oftentimes, a woman's work is not as highly valued as a man's. Oftentimes, it is something that women have to deal with. Their words being devalued just because they are women. I feel like this would be a good time to call out Ava Reed for the last line of her acknowledgments. In the last line of her acknowledgments, she writes, "And to Zelda, I remember you. I believe you." Bitch! When I realized where this book was going, I did think of one historical figure, and that is Zelda Fitzgerald. And for Ava Reed to basically confirm that that was sort of an inspiration for this novel just literally destroyed me. I had a few teary moments earlier in the novel reading it, but I cried tears down my face when I read just that last line of the acknowledgments. Are you kidding me? For those who may not know, Zelda Fitzgerald was the estranged wife of F. Scott Fitzgerald, author of great works like The Great Gatsby, This Side of Paradise, other shit, works that are considered classics. And there is a prevalent theory that Zelda Fitzgerald is the one who actually wrote those things. She never got credit for any of those works, and she was painted as a hysterical woman. And she is sadly another woman who has been defined by the actions of a man. And it was just so, I don't know, I made that connection and then it was just confirmed. It really did something to me, and maybe it's an obvious connection, but it still was a lot. Going into the other topics slash themes in a study of drowning, I think the one that I have been talking about with the motifs and everything else in this video, which is like the probably one of the biggest takeaway from this book, is truth versus perceived reality, and how objective truth matters, but your perceived reality also matters, as you can take from the motifs of the mirror, of water, of things just being. And that's the biggest one. I'm not going to spend too much time on it though, because I feel like the other discussions that I have already gone into kind of shows the importance of it. I will just wrap this all in a quote from the book that I feel like really encapsulates it all. "But if fairies and monsters were real, so were the women who defeated them." Sweet and simple. Let's get into, and this is going to be a heavy topic, shame after sexual assault. This undoubtedly goes into that. It is something that Effie deals with, and she has lied to herself and not stuck up for herself because she doesn't see the point in it, because a part of her feels like it is her fault, and it is not. I felt that Ava Reed exploring this topic is important because so many women do need to hear that the things that happen to them are not their fault, and just having someone say that they believe you. And she did such a good job of it without going into graphic detail of the assault itself, while also just handling it so well. I'm going to share a few quotes from the book that I felt were really, really impactful. Sometimes she wanted to tell someone everything that had happened and see what they had to say about it. She had already heard the version of the story in which she was a tramp, a slut, a whore. She had heard it so many times, it was like a water stain on velvet. It would never quite come out. She wondered if there was another version of the story. She didn't even know her own. I knew I beat him in the end, but for so many years all I could do was run and hide. I just sat there and let the water pour in around me. I didn't know that I could fight back. I didn't know how to do anything but wait to drown. Oh my gosh. That literally, so well done. It was truly an honor to read A Study in Drowning. I'm so happy that I did, and I cannot wait to see what else Ava Reed writes in the future. I am set for everything else she has to offer. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this discussion. I do hope that you share your thoughts below, what you loved about the book, what you rated it, and yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts. I will leave you with a quote. If you can learn to love that which despises you, that which terrifies you, you can dance on the shore and play in the waves again, like you did when you were young. Before the ocean is friend or foe, it simply is, and so are you.